What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the basement. We got a real fun Kickstarter interview today. My buddy David Kann is with us. He is the author of Lovecraft P.I. You've seen two of these graphic novels on the show already. I happen to have them next to me. We'll show those to you later. And he's got a brand new Kickstarter that we're going to talk about. David, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks, Pete. Really happy to be here. Finally,
we
get
right?
to see each other. Not face to face, but close enough.
Maybe one of these days when conventions reappear on the horizon.
Yeah, right. Head back down
got
to New York.
My trusty Lovecraft P.I. shot glass, so this is how
Excellent.
we'll be drinking today.
Very good, very good.
Salud, brother.
Salud.
So the past two stories that I've gotten from you, I've kicked in on both of your Kickstarters. We've got Shot in the Dark
Thank you.
and The Curious Case of Re-Animator. Both of these are fantastic Gumshoe detective stories starring Ward Lovecraft, detective of the Miskatonic Agency. And each of these revolve around like a different H.P. Lovecraft story with other stuff peppered in. You've got obviously The Curious Case of Re-Animator, and A Shot in the Dark was basically Innsmouth.
Right.
Shadow Over Innsmouth. And now the new one, you're teaming up. Well, I'm sorry. Detective Ward is teaming up with the kids from Miskatonic High.
Right.
This is another indie Lovecraftian story that was started on Kickstarter. You guys just kind of met and teamed up over this. Tell us about that.
Yeah, Mike Shea and Ryan Mendoza, the two guys that run that, have created that book or that series. And these guys are just juggernauts. I mean, they're up to like book 8 now. And they put one out every 2 months, 3 months on Kickstarter. And I found them probably mid last year when they were just 2 or 3 issues in. And what I wanted to do with Lovecraft is I always saw Lovecraft P.I. as a very malleable and organic IP that I could put them into anything, more or less. Mm-hmm. And I was always a big fan of the old Scooby-Doo 70s cartoons, and then you have like Batman show up and it's like, oh, what the heck's Batman doing in a Scooby-Doo? That's kind of cool. So for me, that kind of carried through. And when I saw this, I was like, oh, it's like the old Archies, but mixed with Lovecraft. And these kids are just trying to handle stuff in a modern time. And I was like, what happens if my guy just ends up meeting up with these guys somewhere along the line, whether it's in the future, the past, or however we make that happen. But I just like the fact that they have this drive to create stories like every couple of months. And I also like the way they handled all the kids and how they, act with amongst each other, but also how they handle all the situations with the Lovecraft monsters.
Mm. See, the beauty of a Kickstarter like this, and I've never actually seen a dual Kickstarter team up, so this is pretty exciting for me. I'm unfamiliar with the Miskatonic High kids, so this is an interesting introduction for me, and it'll allow me to backtrack through their stories. So you've been at this whole Lovecraft game for quite some time now. What was it that actually turned you on to H.P. Lovecraft? Was it one particular story, or was it like a discovery over time?
I'd have to say, I mean, what it got early started was back in 85, 86, when I think it was HBO first ran Re-Animator with Jeffrey Combs. And, I was, 12, 13, something like that. And watching that movie just blew my mind. I mean, I wasn't allowed to really watch R-rated movies, and that was an unrated movie. So I was like, oh, well, it's not R, so, how bad could it be? And I was just like, holy smokes. I mean, that movie's just, that would never get made. I mean, I don't even think that would have ever gotten made even 5 years after it got made. But that movie's just so insane. And I was like, who's this H.P. Lovecraft guy? And I was big into Edgar Allan Poe at the time. And it wasn't until later on in life that I discovered that, Lovecraft was a huge fan of Edgar Allan Poe. But I started picking up his stories and I started reading, like I read The Re-Animator was first. And I realized that, oh, it's not exactly like this movie, but it has a lot of those essences in it. And then through college, I would pick up and read some of his stuff. And then I kind of forgot about him until about 10 years ago or so. And his name ended up, hitting the public domain. And guys in my company and myself had come to the decision of making a Lovecraftian type of story. And we wanted to do it as a screenplay first. And we were trying to think of the way to do it. And we liked Dashiell Hammett. So in the Continental Op, who Dashiell Hammett wrote Maltese Falcon. And so to take that kind of very short, staccato, quick-witted detective of the 20s and 30s and mix him in with the Lovecraftian kind of cosmic monsters, I thought would be a kind of a blast to do. And so we wrote it as a screenplay first and sent it around. Nobody seemed to be interested. We I don't know, about 18 months, we kind of had it shopping. And then after that, I was like, well, I'm in a situation where I can kind of produce this as a comic, even though I've never done a comic before. I came from a film background. And so I figured, well, what the heck? That seems to be what people are doing to try to get their product out there. And with us, it just seemed like kind of a no-brainer because there wasn't a lot of Lovecraft stuff out. I mean, you're talking only 10 years ago, and there wasn't that much of his stuff out there. Right. I mean, you had the RPG games and so on and so forth. It just seems like in the last 5 years, it's kind of exploded. But he's always had a pretty solid fan base. And, so it's just one of those things that's like, what story do we do first? And one of my partners, his very story was Shadows Over Innsmouth. And so we kind of matched that up with Red Harvest, which is another one of Dashiell Hammett's stories that they've made into several films like Yojimbo. And we thought that was kind of a good launching spot off. And then from there, one of my favorite stories is Re-Animator and Call of Cthulhu. And so I was like, well, how can I mash these guys up and add in the Continental Op aspect? And so I've kind of decided to take Curious Case and break it into 3 parts. So Curious Case is the Louisiana portion of Call of Cthulhu, where they meet Inspector Legrasse and deal with that whole aspect of the story. And then the next book will be the Wilcox and so on and so forth. But that's kind of how I wanted to go about it. Is I'm trying to add, stay within the confines of just HP's work and like his own group of stuff. I don't venture out from there, like reading any new material from Lovecraft because I don't want to get tainted. Mm-hmm. But also adding in my stuff and like kind of how I see it and taking it in a bunch of different ways and also adding a lot of mythology, like Egyptian mythology and Greek mythology. I like to add that stuff in as well and try to keep it very historically accurate in a lot of ways because I think that grounds the books a bit too.
I can tell you I had a lot of fun with just the whole Gumshoe aspect of it. And it was such a fresh take on it to see that, like you said, that kind of Maltese Falcon, old school detective, especially with just the way that he talks to people and just right. That kind of gruff, sarcastic exterior that he has. I can tell you this much. You said you discovered it with Re-Animator. I didn't see Re-Animator until I was well into high school. Prior to that, I was watching a lot of horror movies late at night, like sneaking out after my parents had gone to sleep and like watching stuff on cable. And the very first thing that I ever saw about Lovecraft was that horrendously B movie, The Necronomicon, where it was like an anthology of his stories. And H.P. Lovecraft himself is like in the library at Miskatonic University, and he's looking through the Necronomicon, and all of a sudden this like Cthulhu kind of tentacled monster is awakening in the basement. And I was like, this is horrendous, but it's awesome. What is this stuff? So that's... I think it was like dormant for a while, and then I kind of picked back up on it as I discovered audiobooks on YouTube, and I'm like, I'm just listening to everything at this point, just strolling through all of his stuff as I went along.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the YouTube stuff because I never realized the audiobooks were on there either until, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And it's great because you read them, you read the stories, but then you listen to somebody else, especially a really good audiobook of them. And it's great because then you get to understand like, oh, okay, this is how they say certain things. And, because obviously he has a lot of interesting characters and creatures that some of their names are very hard to pronounce. Try to write when you're trying to spell, Nyarlathotep out, it's just like, okay, it's N-Y, is it 2 A's? Is it 3? Where? So, but having these guys kind of say it really kind of helps you, and it really builds. I think some of the audiobooks out there. There's one in particular that there was a gentleman that did it back in the 80s, and they're all on cassette, which you can't find, but they're only on YouTube now, and they're great because they have that kind of old scratchy quality. So you definitely feel like you're listening to something just kind of beyond. So I kind of just add to it as well, which is great. So
if I can shout out one of my favorite YouTube channels, Horror Babble does a whole bunch of really fantastic readings, and they've just recently started delving into, like you said, the real acting aspect of it, where they're almost putting on a show with background sounds and music and different actors reading different parts. It's gotten up to be a lot of fun. They just recently did Stonewich Horror. Wow.
Stonewich Horror. Oh, interesting. Yeah, because yesterday I just listened to The Horror in the Museum, which is great. I mean, I read that years ago, but I was like, oh, I forgot about the story. So I started listening to it. I was like, oh, wow. And then you're starting to think, like, remember that old movie, the Wax, was it the Wax Museum with Vincent Price from the 50s? And I was like, God, if Vincent Price was still around, that whole kind of essence of that just would have been awesome,
Yeah, he was a brilliant and scary guy.
One of the things that I'm doing with Ward right now, and, as we talk about the crossover, Ward's been stuck in time, so that's what ends up happening in the crossover. So it starts in 1932. He's dealing with the goat, the goat creature there, Shub.
Yes,
and then he ends up getting stuck with that thing, and then arrives, is frozen there until 2018, and then the kids find him in a barn, which is pretty damn funny to begin with. This poor guy's just stuck in the barn for 80 something years. But one of the things that we're playing with for the next couple of books as well is that he does do a lot of parallel universe jumping, or time jumping, because it was always in our minds, 10 years ago when we came up with this whole idea, was that he was very much like a Doctor Who type of character as well. He wasn't just the Bogart or the Continental Law, because you're dealing with cosmic stuff. You kind of have to do that type of thing. I think it lends itself to the story being able to put him in uncomfortable situations where he's in 2018 or he's, I don't know, in 3000 BC. I mean, it's just, but to see what he would do in those situations, to me, is actually the fun of it.
But you're right, because I mean, these cosmic entities, 1932 to 1940 or something like that, is a blink for them.
Right.
They're even on their radar. So the idea of him time jumping almost to kind of chase these entities back and forth is, it's absolutely necessary. And you're right, it does create a lot of fun dialogue. One of the first things I thought of when I saw this new Kickstarter was, well, how is Ward going to interact with these kids in, from the 1930s to our modern time now? And I'm like, well, what's going to happen? And you gave me the privilege of pre-reading the PDF beforehand. And I have to say, no spoilers out there for you guys. You guys got to pick up the book. But I do really like the way that you handled the time jump in this case. It's very effective. And the use of extra mythology in there and tying it back to Lovecraft is very brilliant.
Thanks. Thanks. Yeah, there's a couple little Easter eggs in there. I'm sure since you read the Curious Case, because the Curious takes place during the calling, so you go from February to basically April 1st. And then this book takes place 6 months later. So it takes place right in July 1932. So he's still on the hunt for certain characters from that previous book. So he mentions Castro at one point, who's in the second part that's coming up and that will launch in January. So there's a lot of the stuff in there that we try to, I try to always, even when Shot in the Dark in the Curious Case, I always like throwing little Easter eggs in there, whether it's for H.P. Lovecraft fans, whether it's for, fans of just the books themselves, because I do a lot of research in H.P.'s life. So I always like to kind of pull bits and pieces, stuff that nobody, even knows, and throw it in there, see if anybody picks it up. And, but with the kids, I really love watching old, film noir is one of my favorite genres. Probably is my favorite genre next to horror, which they're basically interchangeable, is watching Bogart, and just the way that guy, he's so monolithic in everything that he's done, that when he's given a task, no matter whatever the odds are, he just handles it, And if he's got to, if it's slightly off color or something that he's got to contend with, he'll deal with it, and then he just keeps forging ahead. And that's always in the back of my mind how I wanted Ward to be and how he handles things, for the most part. So when he's dealt with being stuck for 80 something years and then has to come out and he's dealing with these kids, he's just looking at it like, oh man, all right, so I'm in this future, I got to deal with this technology. I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but I got to kill this thing. And that's his whole mission, is to just kill the monster. And whatever gets in his way, he'll figure it out. But he doesn't let that trip him up. And I think that says a lot for that character. And I think there's a lack of that in a lot of writing these days.
I think too many people get hung up on how the character reacts to their different situations. And you're right. Ward is just kind of like, well, stuck in the future. This is about par for the course for my career. Just go. And he's much more able to roll with the punches of, well, stuck in the future. Right. Let's see what happens. And the dialogue that gets thrown in with him and the kids, I crack up whenever I see a well-done fish out of water story. Like, mild spoiler, when he tells the kids, okay, we have to catch this thing. Shub-Niggurath just escapes and is, just gets finished ripping apart a whole bunch of cows. Great scene, by the way. And he's like, all right, now we gotta call the Miskatonic agency. Get me to a phone booth. And she's like, here, what the hell is this? Sparkly. she's like, get me an operator. You mean Siri? And just the back and forth is very, very fun. And I had a lot of laughs about that, and it's very well done.
Yeah, it's funny actually you mentioned that, because I think I just posted that on Instagram. That one panel of him just looking cross-eyed at the phone, where it's just his whole face in the frame, and it just always cracks me up because, again, it doesn't get in his way. I mean, he gets in his way for 30 seconds where he's like, oh, "What the hell is this thing?" And then she helps him handle it, but he's like, "This is the mission. I must keep moving forward."
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, he doesn't even realize how the hell he's supposed to get back. I mean, he doesn't even question that at all.
At this point.
No, doesn't care. He's just like, I got to just get rid of this thing that I've been stuck with for 80-something years, It's
funny, like, he's talking, he's like, talking to the cops, like, listen, we've got this crazy monster running around. It's like, sir, we're going to connect you to the narcotics abuse hotline. It's like, all right, we're screwed. Just put this in my pocket. Get it. They're useless.
Well, that, and then there's the other thing too is he obviously, between the first two books that you've read of ours, he likes his bourbon and he likes his cigarettes, and we do a really fun thing where he's constantly just bummed out that his cigarettes are always busted up, and he's trying to ask the kids if they want one or if they have one, and kids are like, what are you talking about? No, nobody smokes. He's like, what? He just doesn't comprehend that, but doesn't care. He's still going to do it,
One more spoiler to throw it out there. That was such a great line. He's like, what do you mean they cause cancer? If they caused cancer, they would have said something about that.
Yeah, exactly.
Really dates the character of like, oh, it's 1932. Even the doctor smoked while he was examining you, for God's sakes.
Oh, yeah.
In the artwork,
exactly.
If any of you out there in YouTube land don't believe me, just Google up some old-ass doctor artwork, and they'll be smoking right next to you. Doctor smoking artwork. Go ahead. Have fun.
Oh, yeah.
So now this is the first Kickstarter for a 2-issue series, a 2-issue team-up with the Miskatonic kids. Now, This Kickstarter is already grossly successful. You guys hit your goal within like a half a day or something, if I'm not mistaken.
It was a new record for us. We hit our goal in 8 minutes.
Wow. Okay.
I think it may have even been less. It may have been 3 minutes. I think it was 3 minutes when I went back and checked. I look at my phone, I'm like, holy cow, 3 minutes in, we've already made, I think it was like $1,600, and our goal was originally like 300.
Yeah. Why was the goal so low? Was it just like for the sake of, we know we're going to make this, so let's give people the opportunity to jump in and get some cool stuff out of it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to answer for Mike because I didn't actually specifically ask him that question. But for myself, when I do Kickstarters, after when we did Shot in the Dark, whatever it was, 5 years ago or so, I think we had that on there originally. It was like 12,000 to raise. And people, I don't know if people understand this, but with Kickstarter, I mean, if you don't, at the end of however many days you set your thing up, if it's 30 days, at the end of that 30 days, if you don't make that 12,000, you get nothing.
Right.
Okay. So you could be sitting there humping it for 30 days, trying to promote it, get it out there and everything else. You lose that. That's nothing. Not like Indiegogo, which, you get it as it comes. Mm-hmm. So that was a hard lesson for us because we did make it, but it was by the skin of our teeth. And we did a lot of grinding for that. So for the second, when I did Curious Case, I lessened it because the book was done. And for me, I'm just using it as distribution to get the word out there. And I would have to say it's probably the same thing with Mike, is that he's done a bunch of these. And because for us, it's not just the book, it's also the added swag that we kind of give with it as well.
Right.
And the stretch goals and all that kind of fun stuff. And sometimes, like on this campaign, we have 2 stretch goals. First one was the Ward Lovecraft trading card, because Mike does a lot of trading cards for his Miskatonic characters. So he wanted to do one for Ward, which is awesome because I used to collect trading cards, still have a bunch. Mainly my old Star Wars ones, but to have his stats on the back is pretty dope, for a little independent character. And then the new one that we just finished, we just cleared, is your own Miskatonic Supernatural Detective Agency ID card that goes with the badge, and which is something I've been wanting to do for a while, but I never had any way of getting it out there. So that to have that as one of our stretch goals, and for us, it's not that much more, with shipping or anything to that degree. It's just nice as an adage. So that's to me what I like about keeping the goal kind of low, is that, yeah, we know we can probably hit it. We're not stressing it too much to hit it, but then we're not dialing back any of the promotion. We're still doing a lot of promotion because there's so much other cool stuff that we can do, like the coins. We have a new coin, plus the add-ons, which are a nice feature where you can get multiples of things, which we're beta testing that right now with Kickstarter. They never did add-ons before until earlier this year. It's kind of nice, to have that little feature on there and not go through a different feature after a different program after the campaign is over.
I think it could potentially be a lesson for future Kickstarters or future creators looking to do a Kickstarter. Mm-hmm. The idea, I think, of starting the goal so low is that you know that you're going to hit that goal, or at least you're very hopeful that you'll hit that goal, and it allows you to give all of this stuff to your fans, whether it be add-ons that you said, other cool rewards, and other stretch goals.
Right.
Yeah, it certainly gets the word out there with a successful Kickstarter, and then people can show off all of their cool swag. I actually happen to have some of it next to me from the last Kickstarter that I'm going to show off for everybody and just show you guys some of the stuff that you can get. You said that there's a new coin out there.
Yes.
I'm going to have to get in on, but where's the camera at? So this is the Cthulhu coin.
Yep.
Very cool.
Yeah, we do. We have little coordinates on the back. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I always I love challenge coins because, I always feel that, myself, I always like to have some type of a totem with me. And my dad was in the military, and he used to collect challenge coins from all over the world when he would have to travel. So it's very interesting because that's usually how, instead of business cards, what people typically do in the military, it's like, whether it's a country or a base or whatever it may be, you hand each other your coins. And that was their way of kind of making this cool little collection of all these coins from all over the world. And so that kind of stuck with me. And one of the things I wanted to do, and I'm also used to like RPG gaming. So I thought, why not have something a little bit more interactive? And when you have the coordinates on the back, like the coordinates for the Innsmouth coin here, is for the actual EOD building that I happened to, it took me a while to find, but it's supposedly the actual EOD building that H.P. Lovecraft wrote about in Shadow Over Innsmouth, which is still there. So I found those coordinates, and then for the Call of Cthulhu coin, that's actually a little atoll out down in Louisiana where the story kind of takes place. So for me, it's always it's kind of nice because it's it's to find where these stories take place. And so for the new coin, the one side has the 2018 Miskatonic High with Shub, behind the school, and on the back it's Shub actually climbing the Washington Monument like King Kong, and it says Lovecraft P.I. 1932. So that's going to probably be our only coin that actually has our logos on it, because one of the things I try to do is, I advertise my stuff all over the place, but with coins, I find I just didn't want to have to stamp our logo or website or anything on it. I wanted to kind of keep it a mystery because it's, that's what it is. I write detective stories. So for me, it's if anybody sees this and doesn't remember where it comes from or whatever, that's kind of cool. It's like I almost prefer that as opposed to everything just stamped with, Lovecraft P.I. or
logo, and there it is. Yeah. The artwork on the coin is amazing. I will say that much.
Thanks.
And on the subject of newly discovered things, I just discovered the coordinates. I had no idea those were there because I was always just fascinated by, on the esoteric order of Dagon, you've got the little, the deep one and the girl on there. Yep.
Which I was surprised I'm surprised we even got that on there, because it was such an incredible drawing that Daniel did for me, who's my illustrator that does my books, or did a Curious Case in part 3 of Shot in the Dark, that I was actually kind of shocked that they were able to do this. And then Joel, who's our graphic artist and our letterer, designed the Call of Cthulhu coin. And we tried that with black metal because we were trying to do each coin as a kind of a slightly different color. We don't want them to be all the same. But it's also a test marketing too. So we'll see how everything does. And we may change the colors again to keep it. Also keeps a kind of collectability aspect of it too. Since, like yourself, I can tell from behind you like to collect things, and I do as well. So I try to keep things on a collector's front of what I would like to get if I was a collector, and not just buying 50,000 of that one item.
Right. I've also never actually heard the term challenge coin, and it put to the description that you did. So these were coins that people like in the armed forces would give each other depending on what platoon or battalion they were from, and that marked their group.
Yeah, so
I never knew that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that's my dad had shown me quite a bit that he had over the years in his travels, and it's it's just meeting up with other guys from other bases, from other countries, and so on and so forth. And they just exchange them. And so he'd have, I don't know how many they're actually given of their own, but, or if they could just buy them or however that works. But to exchange that like that is kind of cool. And I thought that was pretty interesting that this is how people communicate, through other languages and other cultures. So for me with the coin is kind of a representation of that, as well as, I just like to I always enjoy having like that kind of totem aspect.
That's a really awesome inspiration to these items. I never knew that in my life. That's pretty educational for me right now. It just makes me appreciate them that much more. They're really cool.
Thanks, man.
Another one of your add-ons is the Miskatonic Detective Badge Agency, the detective badge.
Oh, yes.
Quite happy with that.
Yep.
And that sits next to old Ward himself. This is one of the mini busts. Now, I went with the faux bronze paint on this one to kind of give it like an older feel and aspect. And you also have this is just so I hope you guys there can appreciate the sculpt on this. Man, that
looks awesome.
Sculpture on this is so insane. It's just outright creepy, and just the gaping maw and everything. It's so awesome. And I don't know who that artist was that painted up that really like realistic colored one. Was all like blue with the red eyes, and you had it, I think, on your Instagram. Yeah. That was dope.
Yep.
I was very jealous of that. I was like, all right, well, I just like spray painted it 3 or 4 different like tones of brown, trying to get like, rustic look. And this guy's like,
right,
shut up and sit down. All right then.
Well, it's funny because I had he was a guy that I met at a show last year. He what I did too is I bring like those little kits. I have half a dozen of them. I get about 10 each that I get made each time for my mold maker, and I'll take one on the road with me, and I'll just sit there and kind of tinker with it and start painting it up. So I have one that I've been working on now for like 6 shows, and it's taken me forever because I'm doing other things at shows, obviously. But it's kind of fun because I'll have it kind of there, and people see it going, oh, okay. And my guy's kind of green, and so it looks more like a reptile, but it's kind of cool because then people get to see kind of that as opposed to just seeing like the white resin that it comes in.
Mm-hmm.
And the detail is quite good. I mean, the fact that Dean, my mold maker, is able to, the teeth alone, are so small, but he's able to get all of them perfect. He's the greatest.
The real beauty. It's funny you bring up the teeth, because that was when I opened my last Kickstarter. That was the first thing I noticed was how intricately carved each of the teeth is. And I stress that point because they're not all just, teeth. It's as if this thing was alive and it's biting bone and, whatever the hell it's eating. Each tooth is differently shaped and carved as if it were, this is what happens to like shark teeth. Things break and grow back, and half of it's there, half of it's not. One's sharp, one's dull. That alone was like so awesome to me. The forethought that went into that is really fantastic. I actually might pick up another one myself just to try my hand. I haven't painted in a very, very long time, not since college, but I would kind of like to seeing that and hearing your story of painting it at the shows is kind of inspirational. So maybe I'll give it a whirl.
It's a lot of fun because they're small, they're micro busts. We created the figure in house, and then I met up with a company named Blackheart Productions, and they do a lot of just insane work. I mean, these guys, it's kind of an umbrella company that deals with artists and sculptors and mold makers from all over the place. And these guys have been really instrumental in getting our stuff out there and, creating these kind of cool little figures. When we decided to do it as a micro bust, we put it on the pedestal and everything, and people love them because we wanted to keep the price cost down. So they're only $20, and they're 5.5 inches tall, and it's only 3 pieces for each character. Mm-hmm. So it's pretty easy to put together. And we wanted to make something super simple for folks, even if you're not a full-on model builder, but also fun to paint, as you see, with yours.
Yeah, and like you said, the cost is incredibly low. And I'm not going to use the word cheap. I'm going to use the word inexpensive, because for the detail that goes into these things, and being just so small, they can fit anywhere. You don't have to make room for something like this. You just right on the horror shelf, and it fits perfectly. And it is
yourself,
expensive. $20 for a piece like this is fantastic.
Well, like yourself, I have a lot of glass cases too, and my stuff is as you do run out of room eventually. So I wanted to have something that was not that problem. I didn't want to have another ginormous figure that I had to kind of cram in there somehow. So, and I also like I like to play chess. So to me, it's like these are kind of like enlarged chess characters, and eventually I'd like to do that at some point. But to me, it would be it's just a lot of fun having that size because they're very, you can handle them very well and display them very nicely, not take up too much room.
I'm a big chess fan. I'm not that good, I'll admit. There's no way I'm going to beat that supercomputer or anything. But I would definitely be interested in a Lovecraftian chess set. I can tell you that right now.
Yeah, that's something that we're working on now because we have the Miskatonic Supernatural Detective Agency, so we have other agents and such like that. We haven't really explored those guys yet. Some of them will be appearing in our next book, which will be out next year. But to me, that would be fun, is to have the Miskatonic Agency against the cosmic monsters.
So now this Kickstarter will allow all of us, because I'm sure that there are fans like me who know your work, and there are other fans who know the Miskatonic kids but are unfamiliar with your work, and vice versa. So this Kickstarter will allow all of us to kind of come together and pick up where everything is. We can backtrack and get all of the stories all in one shot, both in digital form and print form. All the rewards are incredibly affordable for the amount of stuff that you get.
Mm-hmm. Well, a lot of that has to do with Mike too. And, like I said, he's been doing this every few months. So he knows exactly how his manufacturing is on his end, and I know mine. So we're able to make those adjustments. And for me, as an independent guy, and also somebody who likes to buy, collectibles and comics, it's, myself, especially now with everything being tough with the COVID and people not working a lot, we don't want to nail people for a lot of expense. So to me, it's you get a lot for your buck. And we're not losing any money. We're making it, we're producing it. And for us, it's, the Kickstarter for us is just getting it out there to a wider audience. We saw a lot of stuff overseas with Kickstarter, which is nice. So that's been getting our fan base even much further out there. So much so that we ended up working with a Danish company named Evoke. And they actually they have already published Shot in the Dark and The Curious Case, translated in Danish. So those are actually available overseas. Yeah. So that's our first official global jump off point, which is awesome because I don't know if you've seen many European books, but their size is a lot bigger, and they send them to me in hardcover, and
I didn't know
they
that.
just look like they look like oversized kids books. I mean, they're the coolest thing ever, So it really got me an idea of how can I make this work, on the state side, and so we got some really nice things planned for our January launch for part 2.
I am looking forward to that. So we've got this team up with the kids from Miskatonic High. Can we look forward to any further team ups with these kids in the future? Yeah,
it's funny. Mike and I have, we've talked about that a little bit. We've had such a great experience on this one, because with the drive that these guys have and
the characters gel so well.
Yeah, they do. They do gel so well, and they have a lot of enthusiasm. And I feel that that's Mike's enthusiasm comes through the pages very well, especially with all the kids. So when I first read those books, I had a lot of fun with them, and I just was like, how can I kind of make this another series with Ward? I don't know how that's going to happen down the road, but we kind of set it up so that they will probably end up seeing each other again. I never like to, not have stuff like that happen. So, and I think it would be a lot of fun, and especially since, some time goes by and, whether it's he sees him earlier or later in life, or maybe he's met him again for the first time. I mean, there's a number of ways we could do it, which could be pretty funny. Because he's obviously the straight man, and he's also, kind of a father figure to these kids a little bit too. Not so much telling them what not to do, but, just kind of staying the course and staying pretty solid and helping them out. And there's also a lot of, I'm sure you figured it out. And especially in the second book, there's going to be a couple of little throwbacks to Indiana Jones in there as well. So there's some little homages we've got going on, and they're kind of, peppered through.
I'm looking forward to that. I'm also looking forward to going back to the fish out of water thing. And no spoilers for you guys out there in YouTube land. I read the book. You haven't yet. So make sure you kick in on the Kickstarter. Seeing Ward being the, like I said, the fish out of water in the first book, it's going to be interesting to see the kids take on that role after what happens in the second one with Kronos's knife and everything, and to see how they react to that. I'm really looking forward to the dialogue. How was it teaming up writing with Mike for these books?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. It was interesting because I've worked. There's another series I've written a bunch of stuff for. Lords of the Cosmos by Jason Lennox is the creator of that, amongst a few of his other buddies. And that's that's like a Masters of the Universe on steroids. I mean, that thing is out of this world. So it's so not in my wheelhouse. So it took me a lot to. And he's got. I mean, his universe is pretty expansive. He's been doing this for a while as well. So to kind of take all that in, I was like, holy smokes. But then when I went to Miskatonic High, that's more in my wheelhouse. But then when I was talking to Mike about it, we decided to break it up so that that they would do the first story, then we would do the second story.
Okay.
And so how we thought that would work is that Mike would write that script, and then I'd write the second one. And then what we do is we just kind of compare notes and see if we needed to kind of tweak things here and there. Between our characters. And, he did a really good job adapting Ward. And then I came in and kind of polished it up a little bit. And the same thing with, him coming and take a look at my script. He's like, he just polished up the kids a little bit here and there, but it wasn't much. I mean, neither one of us had to do much of it because we really like and enjoyed each other's work. And we totally understand what each of us are trying to do. And the other thing too, is neither one of us have an ego to deal with that. So was huge for us, is that, if I made changes or he made changes, we're like, yeah, that would totally work. Or if we had questions about it, we discuss it. And even we got one of the final pages the other day from Daniel, my artist, and we had changed something and we're like, oh, we don't know if this is going to work. And then we started discussing it, and come to find out it actually does. It was a happy accident. So you just don't know how things are going to play out, because then once it goes to the artist, then things change a little bit more. And then we go back and do a final pass with the dialogue and so on and so forth. But it's been a really awesome experience. And I love working with Mike and Ryan on this stuff. They're super open to suggestions, and we are as well. So I like that type of working environment.
I think it's like you said, you hit the nail on the head there. It's important to put your ego to the side, and, not having one to go into the project is really important when it comes to working with people, especially when they're dealing with your characters and you're dealing with theirs, and being able to write them accurately. And somebody saying like, oh, well, maybe this character would say this in this situation, and, always being amenable to going the back and forth. That you're right. That's absolutely important. I want to touch back on something you said earlier, where you have a background in film and how that translates to, you're able to see the idea of directing scenes and how they should be shot, what they look like, and how that translates to writing a comic and plotting it out for the artist scene per scene. Did you find it an easy transition from film to like storyboarding for comics?
No, it wasn't easy. It's funny because I'm an artist myself. I'm pretty rusty, but back in the day when I used to work and film a lot, when I was doing a lot of independent stuff too, is I would draw storyboards out of my stuff that I would shoot. And, it was quick and dirty, and I'd get all that stuff in and then show my DP, and then we go from there. So I'm definitely of a visual sense. And one of the things that Daniel and the boys they've been, and these guys have been working with now we've been working together for 6 years now, which is great. So we've got kind of a shorthand. And initially, when I first started working with Daniel, I would send him a script, and he was like, "Oh, this is too much description, too much this. We got to kind of pare it down, because it is a comic book. You're not making a movie." Mm-hmm. And that's always the thing I have to kind of remind myself, is I'm not making a movie. So then when it came to, Shot in the Dark, that was definitely our, kind of our learning curve of how to make this stuff work. But we also wanted to make it feel cinematic. Now, the luck I had finding Daniel is amazing, because his eye to stuff is very cinematic. In The Curious Case, you can take all the dialogue out of that book and you know exactly what's going on to a degree. I mean, you don't know maybe some of the ins and outs, but you have a pretty good feel of what's happening. And I feel he's able to really nail that. So when I first started working with him years ago, I would draw up little sketches and he'd make fun of me, and I'd say, okay, this is what I was thinking. He's like, oh, okay, yeah, sure, this is nice, and pat me on the head. And then he'd come up with something totally different, which would actually be better than what I had. So it's just that whole mindset of like, when you have a camera and you can move around, that's one thing. When you don't have a camera, you get that little tiny box or that page, and that's it. And you've got to get that right information out there. So since then, it's like with The Curious Case was a very big script. It was like a 300-page script that I had to kind of whittle down and whittle down and whittle down. And even that's why that book is about 114 pages. It's still a lot in there. And since then, I have a a story editor, Francisco, who's been helping me in the last couple of books because we have a new series coming out next year called Berserkers, and that's 8 issues. And so what I do now is I basically just write a screenplay, because that's writing a comic script is very different than writing a screenplay. And so for me, it's still trying to kind of learn all that. But so what I do now is I write the screenplay, make some notes, send it off to Francisco, and he kind of breaks it down to what he thinks the panel should be, and then sends it back to me. We kind of have a talk about it, and that's how we kind of go. So we streamlined the process from, me just sending Daniel, a 300-page screenplay and him trying to make that work into some type of a comic book, which is a tall task. I love doing that stuff. I mean, I love being able to bounce that stuff back and forth, and I never realized that the difficulty of making a comic book going backwards. So, but now that we have that kind of down to a science, our stuff is looking to get better and better as we go.
Well, I can attest that I already like it. So whatever you're doing, keep doing it.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. So we have this Kickstarter's up until November 5th, and we've raised over 15,000 right now, and it's still hiking up there. And we want to just get this out to as many folks as we can, because we think we'll really enjoy it and have a good time with it. It's very old school. You're definitely being transported back into time. And, our second Kickstarter will be launched January 5th, which is the part 2. And we'll be running that for about a month as well. And then we have a new series called Berserkers, which will be coming out in the spring of next year. And that's 8 issues. So we're going to release that one every couple of months.
So that'll be a Kickstarter per issue?
It'll be a per issue. We're actually just wrapping up 7 now, and we're going to start on 8. Mm-hmm. And that whole entire story takes place in a 24-hour period, but we broke it up over 8 issues. Okay. So.
Now, is that Detective Lovecraft story as well, or that's something totally different?
That's something totally different. So this was a story that was actually written by us back in the late 90s as a screenplay, and then we kind of shelved it for a long time, rewrote it with a writing partner of mine, Bill Hawk, and it takes place in 1950s on a small island off the East Coast, and a virus breaks out during a hurricane. And what's really weird is that the virus is from the remnants of decomposing bats. So we wrote this thing before COVID, before all this
modern
stuff.
Craziness.
Yeah, and it was weird, man, because when all this stuff started happening with COVID, we're like, wait a minute, we wrote all this, and this story takes place in 1950, so there's no cell phones, there's no this, there's no that. So you're following all these different characters around for 8 issues and figuring out how the hell they're going to kind of survive and get out of here, and also even get a cure if that's even possible. But we wanted to go back. It's very much a throwback to like the old eerie comics, so it's, hence the title Berserker. So we wanted to make it just kind of crazy and fun.
So after the team up with the Miskatonic kids, what's next for our favorite Gumshoe detective, Ward?
It's a toss-up right now. Right now I'm working on 2 different things. I'm working on the Wilcox Experiment, which is the next volume. But because of the Miskatonic High thing came in, I've been changing some things here and there because of how that now is going to dictate what Ward does. I may put out another floppy in between there, but I haven't decided quite yet on his adventures doing something else.
Okay.
So,
well, you guys out there in Pete's Basement Land, head over to Kickstarter, search yourself Lovecraft P.I, Miskatonic High. That is going to come right up. It's popping up on screen for you right now. Head over there. I can promise you, you will be thoroughly thrilled with what you get out of this. I have already read both of these books. I did a quick review for it in our 13th episode of this past year, and I'm actually going to do a special review just for those books, because I know the 13th episode was filled with a lot of drunken craziness, a lot of talking, and a lot of top 5, top 10 lists going on back and forth. So I want to separate the Lovecraft P.I. stuff and give it the attention that it deserves, and put out a review there for you all. Plus, I just showed you there's a lot of really cool stuff going on. Look at all those interesting mini busts and coins and a badge, and I really want myself, I want that ID card. So I'm going to be jumping in on that. Obviously, I'm going to kick in because I want to read the rest of the Miskatonic High kids' adventures as well. I'm already familiar with yours, and I have to familiarize myself with these new characters. Dave, where can we follow you and Lovecraft P.I. on the socials?
Yeah, so you can just follow us on Instagram, or just under Lovecraft _PI, Twitter, Lovecraft P.I, Facebook, Darkside Media, and lovecraftpi.com is our website. So we're all out there. I appreciate it, Pete. Thank you for having me on, man.
Dude, it's been great. I love your work, and I wish you nothing but success in all of the Kickstarters to come. Thank you for this awesome shot glass. It has gotten a lot of use in the
Cheers.
past. Salud, brother.
That's awesome. Salute.
As for the rest of you, you know how to find us on the socials. Instagram, Twitter, @Pete's Basement, Facebook.com/Pete's Basement. Hit us up, questions at Pete's Basement. We want to hear from you. What are you reading? What Kickstarters are you jumping in on? What stuff do you want to see us review in these crazy quarantine times while we're doing all of these live streaming shows? Do you have a Kickstarter that we should be looking into? Let us know. Dave, man, this has been great, and I look forward to talking to you again, and I look forward to reviewing this book for you.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
See you guys soon.
Cheers.
Pete's Basement is copyrighted 2020. Ripped Productions. All rights reserved. So go fuck yourself.
One of my favorite Lovecraft stories is actually not even amongst the Cthulhu mythos. It's In the Walls of Eryx, where the guy is like stuck in this invisible maze while he's trying to get this energy source, like a moon rock or whatever, at the center. And I actually just picked up the original Weird Tales of that. It cost me like maybe $50 on eBay.
Really? That's awesome.
I would love to see something like Detective Ward trying to make his way out of that maze. Just throwing it out there as a possible suggestion for a future.
That's funny.
Where's a blasted camera? Everything is reversed. It's so difficult. I go this way, it goes that way.
I know.
But man,